All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Advocacy Day. My name is Tanika Aiden. I am one of your co-facilitators today. I am an African-American woman. I have my hair is in braids and a ponytail on my head, and I'm wearing a blue shirt today. And I am with my co-MC today, Taylor. How are you this morning, Taylor?
Doing good, Tanika. I hope you're doing good as well. I am Taylor Crisp. I am a white woman. I am wearing also a little bit of blue, and then a blue hoodie, and white t-shirt, and wearing my hair down, long brown hair. If it's a little messy, I apologize. Anyways, we are excited to be here.
Estamos emocionados de estar aquí y de estar haciendo.
It's going by quick, and I'm excited to get going here. And if you haven't already, make sure you select your language on the globe icon below, on the bottom of your screen where it says interpretation. So, and then we'll get started. Do you want to take it, start off, Tanika?
All right. And then we both go by she, her pronouns.
Yes.
So feel free to put your pronouns in there if you'd like to. All right. And today we are talking about caseload forecasting, what's in the budget. So we get to hear about all of that fun stuff. So we're going to kick it off by hearing from our legislative lobbyists, Nick Federici and Melissa Johnson. And hopefully I got that name right. Welcome.
All good.
For being with us today. Okay, great.
Thanks for this opportunity. As Tamika says, my name is Nick Federici. I'm one of your two lobbyists down here in Olympia, along with Melissa Johnson. Want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what's happening right now in the budget picture. There's a lot of policy conversations that happen, but I'm a firm believer in if they don't fund those promises in the budget, those are hollow promises. And so this is our opportunity to see who and what they value with the dollars from the Washington taxpayers. On Monday, the Senate, so there's two types of budgets we'll talk about. One is the capital budget, which is about building or acquiring properties or fixing up properties. And the second is the operating budget, which deals with the services delivered to people across the state of various sorts. So the Senate and the House separately release their budgets, and each of the types of budgets gets released. So try to stay with me here. It gets a little twisty, but on Monday, the Senate released its Senate capital budget. A number of you testified with concerns about that or in support of the affordable housing investments that are in that particular budget that Senator Mark Mullet produced. They released it on Monday, and it had a hearing on Monday afternoon. That's now going to move forward and have changes to it, get voted on by the committee, get voted on by the full Senate, and they get sent over to the House. Tomorrow afternoon at 12:30, the Senate will release its operating budget regarding services. That'll then get a hearing at 2:00 this Friday. I know a number of you already signed up for that as well. They'll then make changes to that over the weekend and probably vote that out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that deals with the budget in the Senate. They'll probably vote that out of the committee on Monday, and then that'll go to the full Senate for consideration and then passing over to the House. In the House of Representatives, they're coming out with both of their budgets, the capital budget that deals with construction and the operating budget that deals with services. Both of those will be released on Monday, or that's the latest information that we have. And then they'll both have hearings. There's two different committees that handle those in the House. In the Senate Ways and Means Committees deals with everything financial. In the House of Representatives, they split it up over three committees: a finance committee that deals with taxes, a capital budget committee that deals with the construction aspects, and the appropriations committee that deals with the that deals with spending for services. So on Tuesday, it's anticipated that the House Capital Budget Committee will hear the proposed construction budget. The House Appropriations Committee will hear the House operating budget, and things just keep coming fast and furious, right? If there are changes that we want to those particular proposals, we'll ask for amendments to those and try to get those changed. And later next week, the House will vote on its proposals and send those over to the Senate. So it's this game of lobbying their respective budgets back and forth to one another with what their priorities in the Senate and the priorities in the House are. For example, we know that in the Senate budget, capital budget, they had $25 million for affordable housing for persons with disabilities. That's a substantial increase from previous years, from like $5 million that it's been in the past. So that's terrific that they've increased that number. The House, we're hearing, may go even higher than that, perhaps $40 million. We don't know that until we see it next Monday, but then the House and the Senate will have to reconcile whose number do they use? Are there specific projects that they want to fund for persons with disabilities and other pieces? And then that negotiation will go back and forth. So that's the part of the process that we're in right now. And we have 1 month and 1 day, not that I'm counting, until the end of the legislative session on Sunday, April 23rd. And so all of this has to be decided, reconciled, and voted upon by both the House and the Senate by April 23rd, and then it'll go to the governor's desk for his consideration and hopefully for him signing those things that are positive. Melissa, what did I miss or get wrong?
No, I will just, no, that was perfect. I will just mention the revenue forecast that came out last Monday. This is the forecast that budget writers use to put their final tweaks to the budget. And the forecast shows what the anticipated revenue is for not only the biennium that we're in right now, but the next two, because our budget writers can't always look at just the next biennium. They have to look at the second one as well. It's called the 4-year outlook. So they are very sensitive to what's happening for the next 4 years. Unfortunately, and predictably, the revenue forecast was down. So that means that the state will not have as much funding as they anticipated. After 4 years, it's about $1 billion shortfall or less revenue than anticipated. So that's not great. It doesn't mean that there will be cuts to kind of the maintenance level of programs now, but it does mean that budget writers are taking one last look at their budgets today and probably adjusting down. So budget writers have been telling us for the last few weeks to, be realistic and understand that they have to be a little bit more cautious. We've come out of the last 2 years of federal funding kind of coming from everywhere, and those days are over. And I think some lawmakers who have never experienced that will be surprised. So we need to make sure that all of us together understand that it's not going to be the same budgets that we've seen over the past couple of years.
I believe Stacy Dim has her hand up.
Hey, Nick and Melissa, thank you for all your good work. I heard that after kind of maintenance and all the collective bargaining agreements, we only had like $2 billion left, and that maybe that number has gone down now, and that there were like $200 million worth of requests on the table. How do legislators deal with that situation?
Uneasily. I think that they deal with that by prioritizing, both in terms of their values as well as in terms of squeaky wheels. So it's, I think, one of the things that you all excel at, and that's one of the strengths of this movement is the people power, hearing from people, individuals who are directly affected, as well as the families and caregivers for people who are directly affected by good or bad decisions, right? And hearing directly from, and I think, again, for self-advocates in particular, one of the things that it's that you do better than anybody else is talk to them directly about, if you do this, then this happens to me. I think that that's, again, one of the real strengths, because not a lot of other folks who receive services or a part of a movement like this are able always to be able to participate in that. So, so they'll come out with their budgets, and it won't have some of the stuff that we want, honestly. And so as a result, or they'll do things that you don't like. As a result, the best thing to do in committee testimony, and then us working with you and working with legislators to try to fix those things that they have gotten wrong. Again, I'm a big believer in speaking truth to power, and being direct, kind but direct, so to speak, about how we phrase those requests, but going to them directly and saying, hey, this is what happens if you don't do this. We need additional funds. And then working with sympathetic legislators particularly on the appropriations and the Ways and Means committees, who will be deciding what's in the final forms of these budgets, to be able to get those things fixed. They prioritize based on what's most important to them, what they hear from their community is most important to them. It's hard. I've heard budget writers over the years say, things such as, oh, I know that this is going to hurt people, but we can't, we have to pick and choose who we're going to hurt and who's more important, and who we prioritize. And maybe we can't do it this year, but we can make a commitment to do better next year. And so part of it is holding them accountable to those things about doing better and putting a prioritization on persons with disabilities and your families.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is they're probably hesitant to create new programs.
Yes.
They want to shore up the things that are working now, because they know an investment in a new program is just going to compound the dollars that they'll need to spend over the next 4 years.
And then just another quick add-on, a lot of people think of bills as the way that law gets made and changes get made, but actually it turns out a lot of things happen in the budget too, that are not just dollars. And a lot of people are intimidated by reading the budget and thinking, oh, that's just numbers. I need to stick with policy. But can you just give us a few tips and pointers about why looking at the budget is also really important for systems change?
I mean, there's an adage at the Capitol that the budget bill is the largest policy bill. Like, it is the most important policy bill because it does reflect, as Nick said, kind of where the legislature is willing to spend their money. So the budget can be used to put in bills that don't get passed. They can be put into as a proviso, which means that it's only alive for the duration that the budget is in effect. So for the 2-year biennium. So many bills, if they die, you look, oh, is there a budget proviso that we can put in there that will fund a portion of it or get part of whatever that bill was? So that's a strategy that many of us use when the policy bill doesn't quite make it past the cutoff deadlines. I think as far as reading the budget, it's easy now that it's online. You can do searches, word searches for specific things. It's set up under each state agency, so you can look to the DSHS part of the budget and kind of look through. I like to just look through for highlight words, and then you can kind of go back and read it again. And I know Stacy, you and Diana, I know all of our groups also put together, an outline after the budget's out to make it more user-friendly, because it is really hard to read a 1,000-page. It's very intimidating. So if it's easier to wait for all of us to kind of do that analysis, and then we send that out to our various organizations, so it's a little bit easier to read.
Anything to add to that?
Diana, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Nick and Melissa to talk about provisos, and then Melissa did so. In addition to bills that are considered NTIB, necessary to implement the budget, other provisos go in too as well that were not a bill that died. So I get that question a lot. What is a proviso?
A proviso is a specific use of money in the budget. So you have the budget that's spending what is it now, Melissa? $70 billion total. And as Melissa said, it chunks it out by department and then by sub, division and then by specific programs. So you'll see, XYZ program, Y $1 million, right? But you have to dig for it sometimes. And so provisos are the direction around how to spend that money so that it's not just an empty bucket, it's something that has direction around it. And many times, if your bill dies, you try to get it put in the budget as a proviso, particularly if you have had a bill that wants to spend money on a particular purpose. You put it in as a budget proviso so that you may not get the same level of policy change, but the budget is essentially a bill with 2-year effectiveness. So for 2 years, the period of time that the budget is in force, that effectively changes law because it is a bill that's passed by the legislature and has that direction for how to spend that money for that particular policy change or continuance of policy or improvement of policy or whatever. Necessary to implement the budget is sort of the magic wand that lots of people use. The reference we use as an acronym for necessary to implement the budget is NTIB. And so there's different theories about that, but basically, if you have a bill that brings money into the state, then your bill is theoretically necessary to implement the budget because you can't do the policy and the budget without the money to do that thing. So, for example, House Bill 1628 that we've all been advocating around to improve funding for affordable housing statewide has in the bill a real estate excise tax, an increase on the most expensive properties, mansions, large apartment buildings, large commercial, business properties. And because it has that money in the bill, it makes House Bill 1628 NTIB necessary to implement the budget, because if they spend that money, then they have to go do the bill and it's therefore necessary. Other people have a theory that, well, as long as my bill is mentioned in the budget, even if it's technically dead, if I have it mentioned in the budget, then that resurrects my bill as well. And the rule in Olympia is if you have the votes, you can do whatever you want, right? So if you get your bill put in the budget, then that does resurrect it unless you don't have the votes in both houses to do it. So it's all dependent again on folks voting to retain it or move it forward. But I have used that sneaky parlor trick a number of times over my decades in Olympia to get stuff done. Speaking of my decades in Olympia, I just want to give a brief shout out to one of my mentors, Margaret Lee Thompson, who I adore, and who frankly taught me in many ways how to do grassroots lobbying and how to amplify the voices of people that were often ignored by the legislature. And so I'm very grateful to be here with all of you. And I'm very grateful to Margaret Lee for teaching me the value of advocacy and self-advocacy and family advocacy for persons with disabilities. So I couldn't let this opportunity go by without giving her a large shout out. Thank you, Margaret Lee.
Well, Nick, thank you. That was really sweet of you. It was so great to see you here.
Pleasure to see you as well.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Melissa. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on? If not, we will move forward, and then we're going to have Stacy Dim speak next on the capital budget. And so if Stacy's ready to take it away, we'll have her speak.
Great. And Diana, if you could pop up the side-by-side draft that you have put together, that would be great. Be easier for people to follow along. So just so everybody knows, the capital budget from the Senate side came out this week. And there was a hearing already in Ways and Means, as Nick mentioned. That means the House capital budget is also going to come out, and that'll happen on Monday. And so we'll compare that House capital budget with this capital budget. A capital budget really has to do with buildings and lands and things that we invest in, physical places where things will happen. And so keep that in mind. There's also an operating budget, which is where a lot of our programs end up and where rates end up. And those are the things that we'll be watching for at the end of this week. In fact, I think tomorrow, the Senate operating budget will come out and we'll have a hearing about that. And then on Monday, the House operating budget will also come out. So of those four things, and then we have the governor's budget, of course, in December. That was just sort of that's a budget that we look to for guidance, knowing what the governor prioritizes, but that's not really in play at this point. We're just going to focus on these four budgets. So this Senate capital budget is just going to talk about buildings and things we're going to construct. Okay. And we're looking for two things in this budget. One is how much money did the legislature spend on RHCs and institutional settings? And then how much money did the legislature spend on community-based housing? And so you'll see all those things listed out because there's a big giant footprint at the top, and we'll start with a couple of things. So first of all, in the budget, in the commerce section, there is housing for people with DD. There's a big proviso, thanks to Senator Mullet, for $25 million for new construction for homes that meet the needs of people with developmental disabilities. It's very specific for us. Will be in the Housing Trust Fund, and it'll be in the DD set aside. This is historical and groundbreaking because over the last 10 years or so, since we had a DD set aside, we usually get like 3 to 5 million for the biennium. So 25 million is a big deal. That's 5 times the amount that we've ever had before. What we're hoping is that we might have even just a little bit more in the House capital budget proposal. Well, if we do, then there'll be a conference, and the Senate and the House will figure out, well, what's the amount we really want to have. But it's great if we have some negotiating room. For right now, that 25 million is very, very important. That is money that could start happening, being spent as of July if it's passed. And then Diana, will you scroll down a minute, just down to the bottom where the other individual projects are, because those are also community-based, and I want to have everybody think about that together. Next page. Oh yeah, right there. So if you look also on the left, it says commerce. These are all the projects from individual providers that have been asked for through the budget. So Open Doors has their multicultural village for 550,000. You'll see Community Homes has several projects that got some funding and proposed in the Senate budget. And those are super fun to see. That was, if you look at those, they total less than $1 million. And then we have the $25 million. So those are all community-based expansion. In addition, this one right below it that says DSHS RHC land management. That specifically is to help us figure out how to develop the southeast corner of Fircrest for some other use other than serving people with developmental disabilities. Many of you might know that the southeast corner at Fircrest is in the Dan Thompson account. And whatever the state does with that land, if it generates money from leases, those profits go into the Dan Thompson account, and it fuels some services for us as well. So we like that one under DSHS land management, now that we know what it is, because it will help look at commercial uses of that property so that it will have a nice big lease and will generate lease fees, and that can go into the Dan Thompson account. So we'll change that to a smiley face now that we've heard about that. Okay, Diana, back up to the top there. And just so you know, I met with several budget writers and budget people, and as well as DSHS on this lands and buildings. So what I'm telling you today is the latest information we have. One thing I've noticed is sometimes the plain language of the budget doesn't always match what people think it means or what could actually happen. So we just have to watch carefully for that. So most notably, now we're just going to talk about the investments in the state RHCs. Many of you know that a few years ago, there was a recommendation to build a brand new nursing facility at Fircrest. And that is now coming to reality. The original cost that was estimated for that new nursing facility was about $115,000. And because of the pandemic and construction costs have gone up, they have added in some additional amounts. In addition, there was some back and forth on something around capitalized interest that I don't really understand. That's slightly included in this amount. But the bottom line is there's $146 million in the Senate budget to build the brand new Fircrest nursing facility. There is about $7.7 million set aside, which is part of the design plan, blueprints, those kinds of things that would not get actualized within a bond measure that is happening to pay for the new nursing facility. So they kept those separate. That's what that 7 million is that's inside the box. The number that Diana has underneath the 146 million is a $12 million number that apparently is going to get changed. There was a difference between one section of the budget and another. So we expect that $12 million to change. One thing I learned is that the nursing facility right now is not under construction, but in the next year, they expect to do some groundbreaking. And so we'll have to pay attention closely to that. There is a provision in the budget to ensure that stakeholders within the community contribute to the design plan and continue conversations with DSHS about how this will go. So we'll also keep an eye on that. And then inside this box, number 2, you'll see that there's some money to relocate the adult training program. This is the employment program that's located on Fircrest campus right now. That's an older building, and in order to build the nursing home, they need to relocate or tear down the adult training program. That building, as of June, will no longer be occupied. It's not going to be used. And there was a proposal of initially $2.2 million to design a new one. They've used some couple of $100,000 on a design plan, but they figured out that they need more money to build a new one, and that did not get approved. So it's possible that about $2 million of this ATP money will not go forward. I think the plan is right now to use existing building spaces to conduct the ATP program. And we're certainly going to be engaged with DSHS to talk about some innovative ways to ensure that a supported employment program can be offered to residents at Fircrest without having to build a specialized facility. So just keep an eye on that. The rest of these are all kind of strange things, right? They have to do with safety improvements and roofs and cooling systems and other infrastructure upgrades. And you'll see here that some of these, when it says re-app, where Diana has the number listed, that means that it was reappropriated or it's carried over from the older budget because it didn't get spent. So they didn't spend the money that's listed as re-app, but then some money is new, which means that some problems came up at the RHCs since they developed the last budget, and that's the funding that'll go toward those issues. When I talk to legislators about the investment in the RHCs, which you total up the numbers that Diana has here, that's somewhere around $40 million to keep older facilities still livable. It's a little alarming, right? We want the shift and the priority from the budget to be from RHCs to community investments. And as Nick and Melissa both pointed out, budgets are a big statement of our values. So it's important to understand and point out to legislators that we're spending $40 million on just keeping up old buildings in facilities that we don't really want to rely on anymore. And that they have $146 million invested in a new nursing facility that the community is not happy about. And then you compare that to the 25 million for building new houses and the 1 million on projects that are currently in the works by local nonprofits. And it's clear that we have a bit of a disconnect. So we've got our work cut out for us in this budget. Let's watch and see how the House handles these issues, if the House matches these kinds of things, and whether or not we can be more strongly in favor of the Senate versus the House budget, just in terms of capital costs. And then I think that's the end of my summary, if anybody has questions.
Sean, you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Sean.
You mentioned the House operating budget will be out Monday. Should we then expect their hearing will be Tuesday, or could it be any day next week?
I think that the hearing is going to end up being on the same day, it sounds like. So the Senate and the House are pretty determined to have a short turnaround. The Senate operating budget is going to be again tomorrow, and the hearing will be Friday. We're hearing that on Monday, when both the House capital and operating budgets are out, they'll have a hearing potentially on the same day, which is a little bit crazy, right? It's a very short time.
So we might not all be at the same time then for the hearing. If the hearing,
They may be. I think we'll hear probably tomorrow or Friday what the House plans to do. They keep those timelines really short and they don't give people a lot of notice.
Stacy, this is Nick, just to add in, I think that we may see that, usually they come out with next week's schedule on Wednesday nights. So we may be able to communicate that as early as tonight or tomorrow morning when those hearings will be. And yeah, there's a possibility it'll be on Monday for that quick turnaround. I'm hopeful that they will give us a little more time to understand what the heck is in there before they hear it, and that they'll do it on Tuesday, but we'll know more very soon.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. Yeah, we'll be relying on you guys to help us. So as you guys know, Diana works like a mad woman. She gets a lot of information from all of us. Here's what I saw in the budget. Here's a cut and paste. She tries to put all those things together. Well, she's also reading the budget, and she'll try to get out a side by side, which is a comparison between the Senate and the House budget. She'll also probably add in, well, what was in the governor's budget? What did we think was going to happen? So that we can make some decisions about capital budgets and the operating budgets in a very, very short period of time. So I know you all have high expectations and you need this information. The more of us that read those budgets, the better, so that we see things that somebody else might have missed. And then you can get all that information over to Diana, and we will get something out as soon as possible.
All right. Do we have any more questions? You can wave at the screen too if you can't use the chat. Okay, I think that is it. Thank you so much for your time today explaining the importance of the budget, Stacy. Thank you for being here today. All right, so now we are going to move on and we are going to watch a video from Representative Tavis Couture.
Member from the 35th Legislative District, Representative Couture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I had many causes and reasons for being here, but this is a very special cause for me to be here. When my kids were born, I looked down at them and I didn't think I could love anything more than what I had just saw. And you know, Mr. Speaker, that as a dad, you would run in front of a speeding train for your kids. You would give up your life for them if at any chance, if you could. And I am a parent of kids with special needs. All 4 of my kids are school-aged kids in public schools in this state, a state that said that K-12, including special ed, was basic education. And as we talk about, and we should talk about, what inclusion for kids in special ed looks like in our schools, we should talk about what equity for special ed kids looks like in our schools. But we, Mr. Speaker, are not talking about right now, unless we're talking about adopting this striker, about how are we going to inclusively fund special education. We are not talking about equity for funding between special ed and basic ed, Mr. Speaker. unless we're talking about adopting this striker. We are signaling to my kids and special ed kids all across our state that you can wait 4 years while we look at if we should fund you properly or not. When we have school districts all across our state telling us almost unanimously that we need to lift this cap right now. And that's exactly, Mr. Speaker, what this striker does. It raises the multiplier, and then it notices, like many have already previously said, that parents are the most important part of any child's education, whether they're special needs or not. And Mr. Speaker, how do we help those parents with special needs kids who don't have knowledge of the system, who don't know how to navigate IEPs, who don't know what their basic special needs rights and the responsibilities of the school districts are, who if they looked at an IEP, they wouldn't understand the differences between services and supports, who wouldn't know in the IEP meeting to ask if the service hours are actually being met for their student. These are answers we still don't know. And Mr. Speaker, funding special education is just one step. It's an important step, but it is not the only step we must take. We are in the bottom 5th of the 50 states for special education, partially because of our funding levels for it, but our funding levels just match our values. And our values are saying that you are not a part of basic ed. You are a part of something else. That, Mr. Speaker, is not inclusion. That's not equity, Mr. Speaker. I urge everyone to adopt this striker, Mr. Speaker. I apologize.
If I could remind the good member to direct remarks to the speaker, please proceed.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I urge you to join me in adopting this striker. It's vitally important. I want to be able to go home someday when I'm done being here and we pass it on to somebody else. And I can go look myself in the mirror and I can go look at my kids in the eye and say that I left a better future for you than when we started. And that's the mission of both of us, Mr. Speaker. But if we don't accept this striker, we are sending a signal, a bad signal. We must do better, and we must do better right now. Now, the good gentleman said earlier that we spent or could have spent almost $1 billion in an inflationary increase. Now, this bill is roughly $360 million, the underlying bill is roughly $360 million in a fiscal note. But let's just consider that this body at one point considered giving minimum wage to inmates for almost that same amount.
If the good member could keep remarks directed at the policy before us, please proceed.
Apologize, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need to adopt this striker. It's critically important. And Mr. Speaker, I want you to think of kids like mine and what their education could be if we adopt this striker. Thank you.
Wow, that was powerful. That was really powerful. Sorry. I'm going through some of those issues myself, as my daughter's in a rural school district, so I am going through those challenges right now as we speak. So that testimony just hit home. So that was an awesome, powerful testimony. Thank you for sharing that with us, Diana. Next, I'm going to have Sean Latham speak about the budgets and RHCs and how they work. So if you're ready to speak, Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's hard to fall out of life.
Good morning, everyone. I am excited to be here talking to you today. My name is Sean Latham, and I live in Lacey. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a middle-aged white man who is sitting in my power chair with a red shirt on. I'm the director of Allies in Advocacy. Allies in Advocacy is a self-advocacy nonprofit organization fighting for the civil and equal rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I/DD. One of the three main focuses of Allies is that we advocate and support federal and state laws, policies, and programs that increases power and choice for people with I/DD. We strongly believe when individuals with disabilities, especially those with I/DD, can have the opportunities to live where they want and receive high-quality services, they can succeed in life. I know that because when I was given a chance to make my own choices in life about where to live, who to hire as my provider, and where to work, I felt more connected to my community, and I felt like I had a purpose and that I was helping others do the same. This is why I am concerned with pieces of the capital budget, particularly those pieces that rely on congregate settings. In the DD world, we know these as the residential habilitation centers. At Faircrest, Rainier, Lakeland Village, and Yakima Valley. For around 100 years, our state has relied on these settings as a place to send people with I/DD in times of emergencies, and crises. This year is no different, in that the Senate version of the capital budget states we need to pay for a few months $146 million nursing home at Faircrest. A nursing home that, if built, will be there for a long time. For a comparison, there is a $25 million DD housing set aside in the budget for community housing, as well as $550,000 for a multicultural village. There are also several maintenance and renovation items in the capital budget for the RHCS, costing our state $40 million. Again, looking at the capital budget for community housing renovations, they come out to a little over $500,000. Now, while I can appreciate people need to be able to live in safe environments and have supports that help them to succeed, I think as do advocates and self-advocates in leadership, we can do those things cheaper and better in community settings. I'm sure most of us have seen the reports from Disability Rights Washington listing the numerous violations that happens at these institutions. These includes violations of abuse, neglect, as well as concerns around dignity of risk and civil rights. Now, I'm not blind. These kinds of violations do happen in the community, and we must work on those too. But it is easier to hide these violations in larger, close-off settings. This is why it is my opinion we must ask our legislators to look forward and not backwards. We must ask them to keep providing money to the DD set-aside amount to grow out more community housing options. I would hope too, this amount can go up even more. We must also ask them to build out more smaller-sized state-operated living alternatives that helps some people with I/DD get the necessary medical support they need and still keep some of their independence. We must work with adult family home providers to make sure they have enough funds to survive and thrive and be able to meet the needs of their residents. We must also make sure we have a larger provider workforce that can meet the needs for those in the home or through a supportive living program. Finally, we must make sure any program or services provided by the Department of Social and Health Services are person-centered so that we can all live a full, meaningful life. I feel strongly that when we demand these changes and improvements to our legislators, we will be able to once and for all, as Michael Raymond states, shut the institutions down. Thank you.
I just happened.
Shut them down, like Mike says. Thank you, Sean. Do we have any questions for Sean today? All right. Well, thank you, Sean.
Excuse me there, Tanika.
Yeah,
Sean,
go
you did a
ahead.
great job. This is Kyle. Great job on your deal. We as Truly Community says, it's about time that folks with IDD live in the community instead of RICs. The RICs used to be the old model. But now, if we look forward and keep looking forward, why are we putting money that is dedicated to go into nursing home facilities and nursing homes when they can put it into housing for people with disabilities? And of course, housing when people who are still homeless. But otherwise, get that DD set aside, put it in the community because it's cheaper in the long run. That's what our budget writers are looking at and saying, hey, what can we do to save money in the long run over time that will help us? And that's the whole thing behind that. And to be able to put, hey, oh, we're going to go put a bandage effects in these buildings where that we can be able to say, hey, we need the where if we're going to build something more brand new or up to the date, it's easy just to tear them down and put the money in the Dan Thompson Memorial Camp. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that comment, Kyle. 3 cheers. I hear some cheers. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Or questions, anyone? All right. Well, thank you, Sean, for talking to us about RHCs and the budget. We are going to move on to our next speaker here, Tracy Kapp. She is here from SAIL, that is Self Advocates and Leadership. And Tracy's going to talk about some important policy bills. So thank you for being here with us today, Tracy.
Well, she was here just a minute ago, but now she's not. So give her a minute to try and get back on.
Okay. So we're gonna see if we can get Tracy back on, but I know I saw Ivanova Smith. Oh, there she is. Hold on.
Sorry about that. The internet where I'm at is not good.
No worries. You're up, Tracy. Go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. With our self-advocacy leadership, we say we meet on the second Tuesday of the month at SeaTac Airport Conference Center, and we are dedicated to the right and power of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Through changing public policy in the legislators, closing the RHC, SAIL will provide with other stakeholders to close the state institutions and advocate for the freedom of our people. And that's one of our bills at priority. And then the healthcare and provider wages, the quality of personal supports relates directly to wages and training, and then Nothing About Us Without Us Bill 54-1 provide meaningful and empowerment inclusion of people with IDD from diversity backgrounds and public policies. And for housing, we need to close the institutions so they can be out in the community. And we need more housing for us with IDD and and also for the homeless. I am homeless and with IDD, it's hard to get into a place, and they need to shut the institution down like Mike Raymond said. Thank you. If anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Tracy or want to say anything? Or if there's anything you want to add, Tracy?
Yeah, it's I would like to see the institutions close and get them out in the community, because they need to be have fun like we do. And it just breaks my heart, but we need to have housing. And we all are all strong advocates, and I appreciate every one of you.
Thank you.
Tracy, this is Diana. I wasn't aware that you were homeless at this point. Can you and I connect later?
Yes, we can. I gave up my apartment because it was too small for me. And so, yeah, and yeah, we can connect. But I just tell you that I even write to our legislators about having, with our representatives to, that we need housing for people with IDD and for the homeless
Yes.
out there, anybody.
And it needs to be affordable and accessible. I agree.
That's what I also tell them all the time too.
Thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. And yeah, if you need any support or anybody to talk to, you can reach out to me as well. And just rooting for you. And thank you for sharing. And I really appreciate you being here. Next up, we're going to have someone who is near and dear to me speak. And she just testified yesterday on the Nothing About Us Without Us on a hearing, and I'm very proud of her. So if Ivanova, you're ready to speak, I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm Ivanova Smith, and I will be talking to you all today about Representative Dara Farivar's Representative Dara Farivar's proviso around Rainier School and getting Rainier School closed. The proviso will have money from the budget. It will have $200,000 of the general state appropriations for the fiscal year 2023, and 100,000 of the general fund state appropriated for the fiscal year 2024 is provided solely to the Department of Social and Health Services in closing and developing a plan for the closure of the intermediate care facility on the grounds of Rainier School, Fircrest School in Lakeland Village, and developing non-institutional state-run 4 to 6 bed community crisis centers. The department must deliver a plan to the governor and relevant community to the legislature by June 30th, 2024. And so this may be a way and a step to closing the institutions and getting us to that better model of community care, because we all deserve community care, no matter how impacted our disabilities are, no matter what special things we need for our medical care or disability related care, that should be provided to us in the community. We should not have to be segregated in some institution to get that care. We should be able to live our lives in the community. And if we need that specialized care that people worry a lot about, we need to figure out a way to provide that in the community. And I'm hoping that this proviso that Representative Dara Farivar has put out will get us into that direction. And that's the direction I'm hoping. I don't want anyone to lose services. Some people have that myth around, oh, if you close the institutions, you don't want these people to get these supports. I'm like, no, I want people to get those supports. I just want their civil rights and their freedom to be respected as well. And they should be able to do that in the community and not be isolated in an institutional facility. So thank you. And does anyone have any questions about this proviso? Bueller.
Any questions for Ivanova? Okay, I don't think I see any questions. Do you see any questions, Taylor?
I don't. So if anybody doesn't have anything, or you want to introduce our kind of fun little activity?
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Ivanova, for being here and sharing your vast wisdom. Ivanova, as they say, is a legend. So thank you for being here with us today. So we are gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna do an activity. We're gonna do some polls. So I believe we're gonna have the polls come up on screen for you, just like that. And then we're gonna run through the questions. Now start it off with this first question here. Wow, you're already filling them out. Okay, first question. What is most important to you in the budget?
You should read each of the answers too,
Oh
Tanika.
yeah, would you like to hear the answers? Okay. What's most important in the budget to you? So there's housing, education, crisis services, employment or day services, care providers, or other. All right, we've got 100% people have answered. Okay, so it looks like number one was housing at 39%. Number two was employment day services. Number three, pretty close, number three was education. Then care providers, and then last but not least, of course, is crisis services.
And yeah, I think I shared the results, but unless if anybody else has anything they would like to share real quickly on the, but if not, well, oh wait, there's another poll. Never mind. I'm sorry.
All right, number two, over to you, Taylor.
Okay, sorry. All right. So your legislators need to hear from your constituents. So how do you reach out to them? Oh, wow.
They're fast.
I know. All right.
Wow, it's 100% answered already?
All right.
Read the answers.
All right. So the number, oh, actually, it was pretty close so number one was email them, the most popular response to reaching out to your legislators. And then second one is all the above, which will include, the next one is meet with them on Zoom or in person is third. And lastly is call them. So a lot of people like to email and meet with them in person or on Zoom, which is understandable because those options are a lot easier and more personal because you're either taking the time to see them in person or write to them or see them face to face. So that's awesome. And Margaret Lee has her hand up.
The thing that I didn't answer that first set on was that I think I'm getting to the point where the most important thing right now is to close the RHCs. And all that money would come into the community. So, I mean, we have a law that says that. So I'm just giving that input.
Thank you.
That's great feedback. Yeah. I think we have one more poll question for you today. All right, so we've heard a lot about the budget. So the Senate budget hearing is on Friday. Will you sign in but not testify, sign in and testify, or neither? I'm not interested. Nope, we're changing some answers. Okay, so it looks like the majority of folks, almost 70%. Okay, sharing. Okay, so 70% said sign in but not testify. Then we have 6 people who said they're going to sign in and testify. Awesome. And then last, of course, neither. I'm not interested. All right, and I believe those are all 3 of the questions we have for you today. So thank you for taking time to fill out our poll. We just wanted to hear how the community feels. Does there anyone have any questions or want to give any feedback on our poll questions there?
It doesn't relate to the poll, but someone, Eva asked in the chat how do you refer to the proviso when you talk to legislators? I actually think that's a good question. Just don't know like who to.
Well, the proviso is the word you would use. Because a legislator, some legislator, either House or Senate, had to go to the budget chair, the people writing the budget, and say, I would like you to include a proviso for, and like Ivanova was talking about, Representative Farbar had submitted a proviso that would make a plan to start getting the RHCs closed. So that's what you would say when talking with your legislators. There's a proviso in the budget that we really support that would make a plan to close the RHCs, for example.
Thank you. And so with that being said, we're going to have Diana Staton kind of wrap this up with updated bills of interest. And thank you for joining today.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with the budget here for you. And so we're in the second half of the legislative session now. These bills all had to start someplace, either the House or Senate, and work their way through committees. There were policy committees, budget committees, and then the rules to decide if it could be given to the legislators on the floor for a vote. And so these bills have made it through that process for the most part. And now at the top of the bills, the budget is a bill. It's actually a very long bill, hundreds of pages, but it is a budget bill. So it has a budget number. The capital budget that came out is Senate Bill 5200. So these all will be coming out this week and next week. So we'll be watching those budget bills and providing information on them as they come out. The personal needs allowance, you will see most of these bills. Now, this is a representative that started these bills, and now it's over in the Senate side going through the process. So bills are under deadlines. They have deadlines to get out of policy committees, deadlines to get out of the fiscal committees, and deadlines to get passed by the House that they're in. So most of these you will see either have a hearing in Ways and Means in the Senate or House Appropriations, or sometimes they're still in the policy committee. Senate Bill 5045 is in House Housing, which is the policy committee, but it did get exec from there, so it'll be moving on to the fiscal committee next in House Appropriations. So we track all of these bills, and try and put them in general categories. So under Medicaid, there's a lot. One of the ones I testified on this week, House Bill 1134, is about implementing the 988 system. And it would provide training and resources for the crisis line call centers. And as most of you know, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, when they become adults, it's a lot harder because there are not much in the way of services for them to begin with. And many adults with IDD also have, mental health things that they're working through. They may become suicidal or very depressed, and they need to talk to somebody. Well, we created this 988 system so people can just dial 988 and talk to somebody who can help them get through the crisis and get resources that would help them. Well, those 988 call center operators, I've gotten calls from them saying, we don't have any resources for this autistic adult who called. Can you give us some ideas? And, we want those operators to have that training and have that information to refer people to for resources. And that's what this bill will do. The operators are really excited and hoping this passes because they want those resources to be able to give out. So this is in Senate Health and Long-Term Care, and the hearing's coming up tomorrow. And then hopefully we will get it passed out of there and onto Ways and Means so it can get out in time before it's cut off. So we won't go through all of the bills, but I'll hit some highlights. House Bill 1407 is about the eligibility for DDA services. We've talked about it that, you know, when a child first comes in for eligibility to DDA and is approved, they're fine until they hit their 10th birthday. And then they have to go through the approval process all over again. And it's very onerous on the family who has to dig up records, and they have to get new evaluations from school psychologists, and they have to fill out paperwork between them and the teacher and get all this stuff turned in. So it's a lot of work for the case manager too, that they could be doing something better with their time rather than going through all this eligibility process. So Representative Taylor brought forward House Bill 1407 to get rid of that 10-year-old evaluation. So a child would come into the system and be approved at whatever age they come in, 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes earlier. And then they would not have to be reevaluated until they became an adult. And that's because adult services are very different than children's services. So they would be eligible for their children's services, all of those things available to them until they're 18. And then they would get reevaluated for adult services. But it would really free up case manager workload time and be less of a hassle for parents to not have to do the 10-year-old evaluation. So that's what we're trying to get rid of there. House Bill 1580, as most of you probably know, we have a lot of children with IDD that are in crisis, many of them living in hospital rooms, some having been sent to the RHCs because there was nowhere for them in the community. House Bill 1580 would create a care coordinator in the governor's office. And this person would be helping families find ways to get their kids out of the hospital and into the community. And for those kids who go in crisis in the community, they'd have a rapid care team to help that family with that child or youth. So this is a really important bill too. And it's been exempt from Senate Human Services, so it will likely be in Senate Ways and Means next. Behavioral health support specialists, and we need more people that are trained to help with behavioral health in the community, and they have to be covered by Medicaid. So this would be really important to help, especially adults in our community.
Excuse me, Diana, I had my hand up for a second. Just the one regarding the eligibility for birth to 3, and then that stays put until you turn 18. Is there a way that is a possibility they can put in that deal that states that on occasions during that time between 3 and 15 for three until you turn adult, not in evaluation period, so that if there's anything that needs to be changed, they can still change it?
Well, that's not evaluation, that's the assessment. Everybody gets an assessment once a year. And that's where if there's changes that need to be made in services or programs, that would just happen in your assessment each year. but that is not the eligibility evaluation. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, because there's two different things. Okay, so the eligibility evaluation, but then they still say about once a year or something like that, you go
Yeah,
through a
every year.
reassessment.
Yep.
Reassessment. There's making sure that there's any, make sure if there's any changes. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so we get into education stuff. Restraints and isolation has been a big topic this year, and the bill has changed a little bit, but we're still working on this to get it to go forward so that we can get schools to stop using those isolation rooms where kids are put in for a long time and left locked in there. We don't need that, and we don't need them being restrained all the time. Usually when teachers and school staff use these two things, restraints and isolation, it only escalates the problem. It doesn't help calm people down. So we are still watching that. It's already had a hearing in early learning and K-12 education, and we're waiting for it to get scheduled for exec session. Let's see here. The special education funding, we've had a couple of bills going. I know that Senator Wellman and Representative Paulette have both had bills about the funding piece. I think his is up here, yeah. Well, so House Bill 1436, Representative Paulette wanted to get rid of the cap completely and increase the multiplier. All of this would give more money to the school districts to work with for kids in special education. But it doesn't look like his bill is going to go forward. Instead, we have Senate Bill 5311, which is going to be the bill to take forward special education funding. And this will increase the multiplier to 15%. Right now, it's at 13.5%. So if a school district has 100 kids that need special education programs, and figure 13.5% of that 100, that's what the state will pay them for, give them money for. Now, if they got kids that are at 15%, right now that 1.5%, they've got to provide the services, but they don't get paid for them unless they go through, applying for safety net money, which is a big hassle for the school districts. So there shouldn't be a cap anyway. We should serve all kids who need those special education services. But this bill right now would at least increase that cap. And then I see that this is written wrong. I said increase multiplier twice. Anyway, so we're watching Senate Bill 5311 as our vehicle for special education funding. It's been exec out of House Education now. So next it will move to Senate Ways and Means, or House Appropriations, excuse me. There's a few under the civil rights and legal. One of those is Nothing About Us Without Us, which had a hearing yesterday that Ivan Nova spoke to. This bill, the self-advocates in sales started this a few years ago. And it's every year been worked on, and it's gotten broader, so it's not just people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There is a work group created about a topic that affects people in a certain category. They have to be included in that work group, so their voices, the people with lived experience, that they will have a voice. And I see a question about, is there a bill also to eliminate the cap? Well, even that was what Representative Paulette's bill wanted to do up here. House Bill 1436 would have removed the cap, but we're told his bill is going to die. They're not going to let it go forward. And instead, they're going to use 5311 which increases the cap, but it doesn't get rid of it completely. We're still working on that. Okay, so let's look at the budget provisos. We were talking about this earlier. These are the ones that we're aware of that are being worked on. House Bill 1628, that was huge for us. It would give us at least $40 million for housing just for people with IDD. It's still sitting in its committee, House Finance, but it's considered necessary to implement the budget because it would bring in new money. And so this bill is still working. And it's kind of our biggest push right now is to get House Bill 1628 to keep moving and have it in the budget. Senate Bill 1676 was early learning special education funding. The bill died, but Representative Sen is working to get it in the budget as a proviso. We also had Senate Bill 5506, which would, originally it was going to create 4 homes that were for 4 people each. But the bill got modified because the fiscal note was just huge. And we need the people that have that expertise, special training for working with people with behavioral issues. We need them available to places in the community like supported living. Sometimes supported living cannot address the person's behaviors, you know, and so it's because they've got staff who are trained to take care of the activities of daily living, like eating and bathing and things like that, but they're not trained in how to work with people who have challenging behaviors. We need that expertise available to supported living in other community homes. So Senator Kaufman is working in a proviso to try and address that part. The Representative Farivar's proviso for closing the RHCs, a plan for that. Ivanova spoke to that. We also have a pilot from the Healthcare Authority that would help families who have kids with significant medical needs. Excuse me. And the parents are working, they have health insurance, but these kids can cap out $1 million policy fairly quickly because they have such significant medical needs. This proviso would help those parents be able to buy in to Medicaid. Their kids don't qualify for Medicaid because the parents have too high of income, but it would let, when their insurance will no longer cover the child, Medicaid would kick in. So this is a really important one. There are several rates, the supported living, they are looking for a rate increase so that they can keep staff. Right now, you can make more at McDonald's or Arby's than you can as a supported living provider. Employment and community inclusion also need rate increases. DDA wanted to do what is called demand planning instead of just caseload forecast, actually knowing what the demand for services is and planning for that, for those numbers. Professional guardians, this is one of the problems we have about closing the RHCs is many of the individuals in the RHCs are professional guardians. They get paid to, you know, take care of the person's services and where they live and things like that. Well, that's why they don't want to move people out of the institutions, because they get paid as the guardian when they're in the institution. But if they move to the community, then they're no longer getting that money. So this would be a state operated fund for professional guardians to be able to give them the money when their individual is moved into the community. The ECHO project was actually in the governor's budget, so that we're hoping it makes it through to the other two budgets. The ECHO project at the University of Washington trains providers so that
Here are some results.
oh, ECHO stop. Sorry about that. So it trains providers so that they know how to work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The governor's budget also included a study on the care assessment that's currently used for all clients. And then there's an adult family home pilot that we're also hoping to make it in as a proviso. So I think I'm gonna stop there. This bills of interest is always on our website. You can find it at arcwa.org and hover over advocacy and click the bill reports. And so you'll be able to see all these things for the current bills of interest. And we also have the budgets listed on that page for the bill tracker. So let me stop sharing so I can try and see if there's questions. Good, no questions. Everybody knows what they're going to do, and they're going to go right to their legislator and tell them which budget pieces they want and which bills they're really hoping will pass. Your legislators need to hear from you now. This is the point in time where it's got to be your voices being heard. Whether you're testifying in a committee, whether you write an email in the Senate, you can sign in on a bill and submit written testimony. If you don't want to say it out loud in front of people, you can just write it out and submit the written testimony to them too. There's lots of ways you can be involved. So thank you, everybody. I'm really glad that you've been here and heard this stuff, and share it with people you know. If there's bills or budget items that are really important to you, you're not the only voice. You've got family members, you got friends, and you can tell them how important these things are to you and ask them to just sign in for you, for the issue as well. Yes, Margaret Lee.
I just want to thank you, Diana, week after week after week, all the work you do. And I'm glad you're feeling better too. But I just appreciate all these things you do that organize all of us. And I thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm still a little stuffy, but I'm better than I was. I know I didn't have COVID, for anybody who's wondering. Okay, well, I think we can move on to Jessica to help wrap us up now.
After this briefing, you have many options to advocate with your legislators. You can schedule a Zoom meeting with your legislators, email today's information to them. You can also email your legislators about bills that are important to you and to set up appointments with them. First, you can email your legislators about bills that are important to you and to set up appointments with them. You can also watch legislative action on TVW at www.tvw.org. You can sign in to testify at future hearings. You can sign in pro, con, or submit written testimony on a bill. Let me show you how it works. Go to www.leg.wa.gov and scroll down to let your voice be heard. Click on participating in the process, then click on testifying in a virtual hearing. Choose House or Senate, depending on which committee you want to testify at. We'll look at a Senate bill today. Select the Senate button. Then for this morning, let's look at the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Choose the date and time of the hearing. The hearing is March 24th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Then click the circle for SB 5187. Then select the type of testimony you want to give. You can do live testimony virtually via Zoom. or you can just sign in with your position on the bill. If you want to, you can submit written testimony. Today we will sign in to testify. Choose your position on the bill, pro, con, or other. Fill out the form with your name, email, full address, and phone number. If your name is hard to pronounce, you can sound it out in the pronunciation box. If your name is easy to pronounce, don't worry about filling out that box. Usually you will be testifying as an individual, but if you are part of a panel, you would enter your name and info as a new panelist, then add each person's info who will be on the panel after that. Finally, select I am not a robot. After you submit the registration form, an email will be sent to you with Zoom link information. Once you get the email, it has links to add it to your Outlook, Google, or Yahoo calendar. Advocacy Day is a project of the ARC of Washington State and funded by the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. Be sure to join us for future advocacy days. Register for each advocacy day on our website at https://arcwa.org/advocacy/2023 advocacy days/ We want to make sure you are satisfied with advocacy days, so be sure to fill out our feedback form. Your feedback helps us to continue improving and helping your voice to be heard. Let's walk through it together. Start at arcwa.org/advocacy days. Scroll down to the 3 smiley faces that say your feedback matters, and then select click here. The link to the feedback form in Spanish is right below the link to the English version. Start by putting in your email address. Next, you select the date and topic of the advocacy day you're giving input for. You can then let us know if this is your first advocacy day or not. Next, you can answer 4 short questions by just picking the smiley faces that answer how you feel about the virtual advocacy day. Then you submit the form, just as simple as that. Your input helps the ARC to know what you like, what you don't like, what is helpful, and what is not helpful. You can learn about these and more ideas to get involved on our website at www.arcwa.org and click on Advocacy Days. You can also contact us at sale@arcwa.org or Diana@arcwa.org if you need help. Are there any questions?
Don't see any questions down here. Well, let's make sure. Whole lot of thank yous in the chat. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you, Jessica, for wrapping us up and showing us how we can be involved. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. Taylor, did you have anything you wanted to say before we wrap up today?
I just appreciate all the positivity, and I think that today's advocacy days went really well. And I will see you all guys next week on the last advocacy days. I can't believe it already. We've already it flew by quick, and we hope to see you next week, and we'll make it really good. So hope to see you next week. Thank you.